I'm Paul Edwards, author of the Mourner's Woods books, and first and foremost, a monster kid. Tonight I'm watching Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park from 1978, released in some markets as Kiss, Attack of the Phantoms. If you weren't there in 1978, it's hard to explain just how saturated pop culture was with the hard rock and heavy metal band Kiss. They were everywhere. They cranked out a number of albums in the 1970s, but they were just as well known for their live performances because their showmanship really was what drew a lot of fans. Kiss wore wild makeup on stage and were known for an elaborate, wild stage show, complete with fireworks, explosions, lots of special effects, and most notably, bass player Gene Simmons breathing fire on stage. So by 1978, Kiss had pretty much saturated the music industry as much as they possibly could. So it was time to broaden their reach, and they tried injecting themselves into other media. First, they started with a comic book. There was a Kiss comic book that sold very well. And then in 1978, they decided they were going to make a movie. They were certainly not the first rock band to make a movie. They were not the first rock band to make a fantasy movie. Elvis and the Beatles had done that. But being Kiss, theirs was going to be on a different wavelength. Their film was going to be a part horror, part comedy, part rock and roll, all excess fantasy story. The basic plot of Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park is that Kiss has been booked to play several nights at an amusement park in California. And in this amusement park, Abner Devereaux, the inventor of all the park's elaborate animatronics, has been fired. And so he wants to get revenge on the park and on Kiss in particular, who he blames for drawing all of the attention away from his masterpieces. So by the use of his wild robots and by the use of mind control, which he has also developed, Abner Devereaux sets about sabotaging the amusement park and sabotaging Kiss specifically. His master plan is that he's going to replace the members of Kiss with robot lookalikes, and when they get on stage, they're going to incite a riot, and the Kiss fans are going to demolish the park as a result. So Kiss appear in this movie portraying themselves. None of the members of Kiss had any previous acting experience, and it shows. And Kiss basically are portraying themselves as these fantasy superheroic versions of themselves. And they have to use their rock and roll superpowers to thwart Abner Devereaux and his mechanical monsters. As you can imagine, this movie is replete with Kiss music. Now, if you watched this movie and then somebody asked you how many Kiss songs were in it, you might think maybe 5. Believe it or not, there were 18 Kiss songs in this movie, but a lot of them were blink and you miss it fragments of Kiss songs. So only when you sit down and actually count through them as you're watching the movie do you realize just how many there are. But they're used very, very briefly, a lot of them. Fortunately, the band Kiss did actually put in a live performance for the movie audience, the audience that was in the park during the movie. They did put on a live stage show, but unfortunately, we don't get to hear a whole lot of it. Some of their live performance is played with them simply lip syncing to the recorded studio version of some of their big hits. There is some live footage where the band is actually performing live and you can hear the live performance, which is good. But For the most part, this kind of thing was pretty common in the 70s. Lip syncing to a studio recording was passed off as a performance, and in the 70s, you took what you could get. So Kiss Meets the Phantom was somewhat of a TV event. It aired on NBC, and I was in junior high school, and believe me, every single student in the junior high school knew that the Kiss movie was coming on, and in just a couple weeks. Now it's just a couple of days, and finally the Kiss movie aired, and believe me, we all watched it. It never really had a lasting fan base after that here in the United States. Oddly, it was actually released theatrically in Europe and under different names, and had an audience there. So what do I think of Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park? Well, if you're expecting a good movie, you're going to be disappointed, because this is not a good movie. But let's face it, nobody in the world was expecting a good movie out of this. Best case scenario, what you were expecting was a good bad movie. And I think it is a good bad movie. It's certainly visually entertaining. It has a little bit of slow time near the beginning when you see Kiss in the opening credits, and then you don't see them for the next 20 minutes. But once Kiss return to the screen, it moves right along. It's ridiculous. It's completely over the top. But what else would you expect from Kiss? Would you expect a serious horror film from Kiss? No. You would expect something wildly over the top. And it certainly delivers on that. My biggest complaint about it is not the movie aspect of it. My biggest complaint about it is the lack of Kiss music in it that's original. The Kiss music that we get is almost all stuff that they've already recorded and released, not new performances or live performances. There is one new performance of Beth, which was a big single for Kiss, and Peter Criss sings that new for this movie. And as I mentioned before, there's a little bit of the live concert footage, which actually does give you Kiss live visually and, the sound too. But with a movie like this, they could have so easily thrown in a whole bunch of live Kiss songs, and it would have worked in the story, and it would have been something a little different than just the studio versions and lip syncing. But this film also brings back a lot of good memories for those of us who were kids or teenagers in the 1970s, which I was. And if you were there, you absolutely remember the band Kiss, and you probably remember Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park too. Every Halloween, like probably a lot of you, I watch a whole bunch of scary movies. And there are certain ones that I watch every year, like the 1931 Dracula, the 1931 Frankenstein, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, Werewolf versus Vampire Woman. That's another one I watch every year around Halloween time. But also, there are a couple of goofy Halloween movies that I can't pass up watching every year. This one, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, and Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. I never let a Halloween go by without watching those two. So that should give you an idea of the kind of level that this film is on. Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, good bad movie. It helps if you know your Kiss music, but even if you don't, this is not a difficult movie to follow. Listen, if you enjoy classic monsters and vintage horror, you should check out my book series, the Mourner's Woods books. I recapture the vibe and feel of 20th century horror films, although not this horror film, and in printed form. And my books are available on Amazon. My name again is Paul Edwards. Thanks for letting me talk to you some about Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.